My name is Aduke Gomez, and it's a delight and an honor to be here with Lasrab this afternoon. I'm a lawyer, I'm a writer, I've written a book for children, I've written poetry books, I'm a history enthusiast, and I'm a cultural entrepreneur. Oh wow, I grew up actually on Lagos Island, North, far from here, on Berkeley Street. Lagos then was, I guess you'd say, smaller, more intimate. Certainly this Lagos Island area was far more residential. I can remember as I grew up walking to school. I went to Holy Child College in Obalende, and I would walk to school. Lagos was smaller, it was a friendlier place, but there was still that energy, that commercial sense of life and living and business. Like, for instance, my grandmother had a shop at Nnamdi Azikiwe, and I often used to spend Saturday mornings there as well. My father's grandfather was kidnapped in the 1820s. His name was Ishetolu, and was taken to Brazil. He came back off and on, and then after he gained his freedom, he settled in Lagos back in the 1840s. He took part in the succession struggles between Akitoye and Kosoko. Luckily for him, he was on Akitoye's side, so he was able to, get a very favorable consequence of that, alignment. But for overall, from 1835, which is the date of the Malay rebellion in Brazil, between 1835 and about 1888, when Brazil formally abolished slavery, there were three main waves of Brazilian returnees. At first, they were not welcomed, as you have said, but with time and political support from the colonial powers at that time, who recognized the kind of contributions they could make in terms of the architecture, because obviously they had come back with skills that they had learned during their enslavement period. So a lot of what we think of as how Lagos looks, that Afro-Brazilian architecture, is actually down to the efforts of the returnees, because they came back with those skills. And you can see them in major sort of public buildings like the Holy Cross Cathedral, the Shitabe Mosque, the cathedral at CMS. All of those public buildings have those Afro-Brazilian architectural, just how beautiful they are as buildings. And those skills, of course, as Lagos became more and more prosperous from the 1880s, onwards, as people became more prosperous, they contracted with these skilled artisans and architecture people to now build their own houses. So all the areas that is still today known as the Brazilian quarters around Bambushe area, you could see examples of those. I mean, unfortunately, there are not as many as there were, but you can still see the former Vaughan House. You can still see Candido Darusha's house. Those are major big buildings that belong to individuals, but still show the beauty and the magic of that type of architectural genre. Okay, let's start with the end. The colonialists, just to use that word from what you have said, I would ascribe to the colonial power which is the British colonial power. And they obviously, from 1851, when Lagos was bombarded, and then from 1861, when they signed the Treaty of Secession, up to 1960, when Nigeria as a whole gained independence, they were the colonial power. So there's obviously a clear difference between a colonial power and returnees like the Saro or the Brazilian returnees who are known either as Aguda or as the Emancipados, which obviously in Portuguese means the liberated ones. The Emancipados were those who were taken to Brazil, Cuba, that kind of axis, and the Saros tended to be those who had been captured, had been enslaved, but the boats on which they were captured had perhaps been intercepted by the British during that abolition period, and so they had been taken off and had been deboarded at Freetown. Freetown obviously was named Freetown because it was a town where people who were freed were repatriated to, because for logistic purposes, it wouldn't have been possible for the British Navy to return all the captured people back to wherever they had been captured from. So a compromise, for lack of a better word, was to have captured them and for them to now be at Freetown. Many of them then, as they grew older, because they went to schools, because obviously the missionaries set up schools in Freetown. So as Lagos became more commercial and was a hub for enterprise, many of them came back to Lagos, either because they remember that Lagos was their last port, or to look for opportunities either commercially or in the civil service, because the way the civil service was run in Lagos at that time, they needed people who to be clerks, to be administrators, but which for the Saros was a very useful opportunity because they had been educated by the English missionaries, so they spoke English. However, the Agudas spoke Portuguese, so they tended to be work for themselves, to be independent traders or bakers or artisans, as we said before. But the Saros were opportune to be able to take advantage of opportunities in the civil service, so they came back. So because they came from Sierra Leone, they were known as Saros, and the Agudas obviously were the ones who came from Brazil, Cuba, and that sort of South American axis. So many. Okay, can I start with mine? Gomez, Darosha, Da Silva, Cardoso, Muniz, Pinero, Veracruz, Verissimo, and of course ones that changed their names. So like Alakija, Hughes, are ones that changed their names either to be a more Yoruba name or to be less South American. Yes. Okay, so if you've ever been to a wakekeeping, at the end of the wakekeeping, you're going to be offered a cup of mengao. Mengao is a Brazilian food. It's also interesting because the English name for mengao is tapioca. So if you are from a Saro family, you may know it as tapioca. But if you are from a Brazilian family, it's mengao. And mengao is actually the name that has now become more associated with it. So, and it's also the manner in which it's cooked, the cloves, the nutmeg, all of those sort of exotic food. So you have mengao, you have, if you've been to a party on Lagos Island, you may have been offered kanjika. Kanjika is cornstarch, but it's sweetened, it's solidified, and it's sprinkled with nutmeg. So it's like a dessert. It looks like little squares of almost opaque jelly. And then, of course, on Good Friday, you would have been introduced to fejon. Fejon is made from beans that are cooked with coconut, cloves, and nutmeg, and simmered for hours and hours and hours. And it's served with fresh fish and roasted gari. These are just some of the types of foods that came back with the returnees, and have now become almost common fare that people forget. And even if you want to take it a bit further back, we eat eba, we eat gari, but it's cassava. Cassava is not a plant that is native to West Africa, so it came back again from South America in that whole transatlantic enterprise. Again, carnival is something that came back with the returnees. It's interesting to look at the history of carnival, because carnival first started in South America when the enslaved people were given a day off to mark a holy day or whatever, and they would dance and celebrate to remember the land they had come from. But fast forward a few years, and those who came back now did carnival to remember the land they had got used to and which they were now commemorating. Because something that is also we tend to forget is that the returnees, when they came back, they maintained a lot of contact with their brothers or their cousins back in Brazil. So the same way that we take planes now, they would take boats and go and visit each other and exchange letters and trade and commerce. So sometimes in a family, perhaps a brother would stay in Brazil and another brother would come back here, and they would exchange letters, commerce opportunities, and all that. I think it's sad that because obviously we were a British colony, that Portuguese language has died out, and of course we don't have so much access to the Brazilian stories as perhaps would have been so nice to have. I think actually I'd like to expand that question. I think it's not just NSAS. I think that the Brazilian quarters has suffered a lot of damage. I think that the houses that our ancestors built are houses that, because in all this, and I'm not sure if I've been able to convey it, we forget that these houses that were built by people who had been kidnapped in the most awful circumstances, had been taken away to a different country, had to learn different skills under terrible enforced conditions. For those to even come back, you have to save up extra money during your enslavement period to be able to buy your freedom if your slave master is not in the mood to give you the freedom because maybe you're his child or something. So you save up the money, you get your freedom. After a hard day's work, you go and do extra money, If you're a woman, you do sewing or baking, all of this to save up the money to be able to buy your freedom. After you've bought your freedom, you then have to save up money again to buy your passport, to leave Brazil. And then you have to save up money again with others to be able to charter a boat to come back. And that's why not as many people came back as you would imagine, because it's economics. Now, if you think of the fact that, for instance, Brazil has one of the largest population of black people outside Africa, and it's not something that's spoken about, you can imagine how many of them who might have wanted to come back and could not come back because of sheer economics. So, okay, you save up, you charter the boat, you come back. When they first came back, as we've said, they were sleeping on Bar Beach. They weren't given land. They were sleeping on Bar Beach. They were in favelas. On the beach, often their belongings were stolen, and eventually, as we've said, they were able to come to a compromise. They were given that land around Bamboche. It was designated Brazilian quarters. So if you think that, then you still have to work again to make the money to build up that edifice. I think it's heartbreaking that we don't understand what these people went through. And I think that it's very important because it's a story of hope, it's a story of inspiration, and it's a story of what the human spirit can do. We tend to focus on Badagry and the horrors at Badagry. But I think that the story is incomplete unless you remember that some did come back. And they came back and they were successful. And very successful. Candido da Rocha was the richest man of his time. So now that those houses are in prime commercial space, it is a shame that we are not able as a people to balance that economic need with the need to remember the history where you came from. So it goes beyond that the houses were damaged in October 2020. It goes beyond, it goes to the fact that the houses are continually being demolished. The need for space, the economic need. I mean, for instance, how do you persuade a family that now has many branches that this little bungalow is of historical importance when they could knock it down and build a 5-story building and be sharing the rent money amongst themselves? It's a very difficult story to balance. But if we look to a future where all those houses are destroyed and all those memories are vanished, what do we then have left as Lagos? And Lagos, even the fact that our name is even itself Portuguese, I think it's important to be able to look at those buildings, look at them and remember, you know what, whatever you are, whatever situation you are in, you can succeed. And those are stories I think that our young people need to know. Our young people need to understand, however bad things look, the human spirit, if you work, you can endeavor to overcome. And I think that is what those houses represent. Another thing I think they represent is the fact that sometimes, obviously I'm from Lagos, I'm a proud Lagosian, but sometimes when you talk to people, they tell you Lagos is no man's land. And they tell you, and they have the sort of like the impression that maybe Lagos just sort of sprang up from nowhere in the 1950s. Those houses tell us that people were here building houses from the 1860s. And so we need to remember that. We need to understand that we didn't just jump up. We've been here. Lagos has been continuously inhabited for over 500 years. It's something that we don't think about. And I think that is why those houses need to be protected, need to be... You don't have to keep everything inside the same. It'd be lovely if it did, but at least maintain the facades. You can change the use to something else. I mean, there's a building, Lumpkin House, I think it's Martin Street off Marina, I think. That's a bank, but the outside was renovated by Professor Godwin, and it's lovely. So those are examples of, you can have a change of use of the building, but let the outside, let the facade stay the same. Oh, wow. Okay, so let's go back to that Bangoshe area. If I was given a wild card, I would make it pedestrian only. I would have restaurants, cultural centers. I would have tourist destinations. I would have storytelling. I would have children's activities going on in all those houses. Language classes even for both Yoruba and Portuguese. That's the kind of thing I would have. I think that Lagos State has so much potential. So much potential. We have historical ancestry which can be polished and developed into a story. We have beaches, we have commercial outlets, we have actually all those huge conference centers, event centers. I think they're on a good track, but we need to make Lagos not only a center for a place where if people come in on a conference, they just stay for the 3 days of the conference. We have to develop things that will make them say, oh, you know what, I'm going to Lagos for 3 days. Let me book my stay for 4 days so that after the conference I can stay one more day and look around the things to offer. And I think that we also have to remember that people don't come to see what they have in their own place. So there isn't really much advantage in destroying old houses to build shiny steel skyscrapers because they have them in their own places. So I think we need to look inside, look at what is indigenous to us and portray that and make that attractive. Thank you. I think it's a great innovation. I think that Lagos needs this type of entity to be able to record history even as it happens. For instance, we are in COVID now. In 50 years' time, if Lasrab is not collecting, sample of first injection or first vaccination and all that kind of thing, we'll forget, because that's what humans do, we forget. So Lasrab, I think, is almost like a conscience, sort of like on our shoulder, to remember, keep records. However unimportant it may seem to you today, a receipt of, oh, I went to get my COVID vaccine. In 50 years' time, it's like, oh my gosh, is this what they were issuing then? So Lasrab has a very key, because it is the records that Lasrab keeps now and collects from what has happened in the past that will let future generations understand how we are and how we coped with the both the challenges and the good times in which we found ourselves.